Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the final section of Chapter 8, which is Section 3. It's about the Kingdom of Aksum. Now, Aksum was a really powerful African kingdom located south of Kush, or what is also known as Nubia. It was a plateau region near the Red Sea. Now, Aksum was most well known from what we learned about in the past back in Chapter 4 for conquering Kush, or the Kushites, in 350. This area that the Aksumites and Kushites were from is generally known as the Horn of Africa. It's a major trading center at that time. Arabic traders sought ivory, and they would then take that ivory and trade it to the people in Persia and India in exchange for things like silk, textiles, which are clothings, also spices from the East. Now, trade from the Mediterranean countries also utilized the seaports, which were located along the Red Sea. So you've got Mediterranean trade, you've got East Indian Ocean trade, you've got trade coming in from China, you've got Arabic traders, you've got Middle Africa traders. So you've got a lot of trade coming through the region of Aksum, which gave it quite a bit of power. Now, when you look at the origins of Aksum, there's a legend that talks about the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. And it talks about the fact that their offspring or son was really the first leader of Aksum. But it also mentions in your textbook about a king, an early king named Zaskalis, which would have had Greek implications, and talking about some of the influence of the Greeks and their spread down into this part of Africa. Next, we'll take a look at Aksum controlling trade that we talked about. Remember, Aksum's location was very key. It's made it a great place for international trade, as we sort of mentioned earlier here. It had great access to the Mediterranean Sea to its north. You could get to the Indian Ocean by way of the Red Sea. The most popular city of Aksum was its capital city, Adulis. Adulis was Aksum's major seaport. Okay. Next, we'll take a look at capital D. We're going to talk about one of the most famous key figures from Aksum, and that was King Izana. Aksum reached its height of power between 325 and 360 AD. The most important figure in that time period was King Izana. He was known to be a strong ruler. He wanted to both establish the empire and kingdom and then expand his control and the control of Aksum. He conquered part of the Arabian Peninsula in what is now known as Yemen. And then in 350, he conquered the Kushites and also burned Meroe to the ground. Next is Roman numeral number 2. We'll talk about how, because of all of this trade, Aksum became a very international culture. Aksum was a multicultural area, including people from Egypt, Arabian Peninsula, Rome, Persia, India, and also the Byzantine Empire. This was due to the trade. Greek was the common language, but there was a local language called Ge'ez, that's G-E'-E-Z, that they also spoke. Next is B, religion. There was a lot of monotheism in this region. Judaism, Christianity had spread. Islam, not yet. Okay, but they also practiced something called animism, and they were known to sacrifice oxen, which are generally used to plow fields back in these times. Through trade, though, the Aksumites eventually learn of Christianity, and it becomes their number one religion. That has to do with Izana as well. That's capital C. Aksum becomes Christian. Izana was educated by a Christian tutor while he was waiting for his turn to take the throne. When he became the ruler of Aksum, he publicly converted to Christianity and made it the kingdom's official religion. So this is where Aksum becomes predominantly Christian. Modern day Ethiopia, for example, where Aksum was located, is home to millions of Christians. It's a very large Christian stronghold, mostly of the Orthodox Christianity fashion, or Orthodox Catholic. Capital letter D, we'll talk about some of the innovations of the Aksumites, some of the things that they generally created, some of the things that they developed. And these are not things that they created only. That some of the things that they did were also going on in other areas as well. But they had a written language. Okay, this is a key. So they had writing. They developed a currency system, which was made of coins, bronze, silver, and gold. They had terrace farming. Now, terraces are step-like ridges that are constructed into the mountain slopes, which would help retain water and prevent it from being washed downhill in heavy rains. Canals, dams, cisterns, which are water-holding tanks, were also developed for irrigation and water storage. Very important in this part of Africa, which has heavy rains, but then also periods of drought. Next is Roman numeral 3. We'll talk about the fall of Aksum. The fall of Aksum is basically predicated or based on Islamic invasion. Between 632 and 750, by this time, Islamic invaders had conquered much of the territory in the Mediterranean world, northern Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, Turkey, so on and so forth, and they were spreading their faith. In 710, Islamic invaders actually took over Adulis, which thus weakened Aksum's power as an international trader. Then eventually the Aksumites tried to get out of Adulis. They sort of try to resist Islamic control by moving their capital and major areas to an isolated area in northern part of Ethiopia, which was mountainous. Okay, because they're isolated, it really limits their trade, and because they're a trade-based kingdom, it kind of led to their downfall. Despite Aksum's legacy in religion, architecture, agriculture, it never really expanded outside of a fairly small area. In your book on page 228, which we're going to look at here in a moment, there are some examples of Aksumite architecture. So we'll go to take a look at a few pictures. This is the Horn of Africa that we're talking about. This is generally the kingdom of Aksum. This is modern day Yemen right here. So you can see kind of where the Cushites were from of Nubia that I mentioned early on. Here's Egypt. So this is modern day Ethiopia, Eritrea, things of that nature right in that region there today. Now the Aksumite, here's Christianity. This is an example of Christianity being spread into the region of Aksum. This is an example of the pillars of Aksum, which are part of their architectural structures, these stone stelas or pillars. And then we have the fall of Aksum and Aksum's isolation. Down here at the end of the chapter, you have some interesting visual summaries. It talks about section 1, which was about the diverse societies in Africa. It talks about the Bantu peoples, the Bantu migrations for section 2. And then it also talks a few key points here about Aksum. All right, thank you.